Hello, this is Wmpyr. Okay, so in the last video, I tried to walk you guys through the footwork for Escrima, Kali, and Arnis. And I tried to make it a comprehensive video, so I knew the video was going to be fairly long, and it was. I think it was close to like 20 minutes or give or take, something around that length. And the goal there, once again, was to try to put in as much as I can material-wise, or pretty much everything. But I wasn't able to. There were some things that I forgot because I'm doing it on the fly, on the spot. I don't write anything down. It's just whatever that comes to mind. And so really it just comes from my experience of teaching. All the details that you see there, it's just stuff that I've been teaching and working on for years, and that's really all I got there. Um, so the video, I guess in a way, was poorly planned. Um, and this is what I like about the video is that it puts things into like surface. It's almost like just sparring, and then you go, okay, well, let's see what comes out, kind of thing. And then afterwards, I could reflect on it and go, oh, this is what I missed, this is what I forgot, or this is what didn't make too much sense, or I could have done better. And that's what I like about YouTube. All this time that I've been on YouTube is that it does that for me. And then I was talking to my friend Bob the other day, and I was telling him that I like writing, and I've been trying to write another book as far as the Escrima, Kali, Arnis, the Filipino martial arts information. And I told him that it's been a struggle, that it's been very, very difficult. And I started pretty much at the beginning of the year, and I'm still working on it. And, you know, from previous years, I've worked on it, dabbled a little bit here and there, but this year I've really, really focused on it. And it's almost the end of the year, and I am not done with it. And he was like, if you're having that much trouble writing, then maybe writing's not your thing. Maybe making videos is more your thing. And, you know, like I said, I tried to make a comprehensive video with the footwork, and I missed a couple of things. And this is why I like writing better, is because with writing, I could go back to it and I could change stuff or add stuff. Whereas the video, it's harder to do that, you know. So let me talk about the footwork stuff. Like I said, the very first thing with, like I said in the actual video, the very first thing is you need to be comfortable being able to just walk and move around while you're doing the arm techniques. So at that point, it's almost like your arms and your legs aren't really working together yet, and that's all right. That's completely okay. And this is what makes Filipino martial arts so easy to pick up, in my opinion. Is, like I said, the first level is like, let's do, you know, partner drills, and it could be very, very simple, like the punching one. We're going to do that, and we're just going to walk around as we do it. And the way that I've taught over the years is I just have my students just walk. And of course, it's better if we do it outside because you got more areas to walk. And this can be treated as like a warm-up exercise where students could be talking to each other, you know, while they do the exercise. They just partner up, and then at some point I'll ask them to change partners so they don't just get used to one person. And that's the first step, but don't think that that's it, because I've also seen some YouTube videos where people are teaching, and they teach that. They go, yeah, this is the way it was taught to me, but that is really for beginners, okay? There's a lot more to it, as I've shown in the video. And then the next step is you could start to make it more combat applicable. And that is when you start putting in some more combat force. And in this case, it's not just with the hand movements. We're talking about combat footwork. And the difference between just walking around normal and in combat, as you can imagine, is that for combat, it's going to be more hectic. You might have to sprint a little bit. You might have to stop real fast and move in another direction. So, you know, that's the more kind of action that's going to happen. And also terrain has a big factor. So that was one of the first things that I noticed, is that when I watched some videos on YouTube of Filipino masters and stuff, they were training on crazy terrain. And that was definitely something that I thought to myself. I was like, I need to do this for me personally. And then when I started teaching, I was like, how can I do this for my students? And it would be great if we would have a road trip together and go to a place where there's like a waterfall and, you know, in nature, in the forest, with different terrain. Of course, that'd be great, but you can't always do that. So in the dojo, how can I replicate that? And the easiest thing was to start putting stuff on the ground that make small obstacles that the student would have to avoid, or, you know, you could also use creativity. But the easiest thing was to put some dumbbells and also water bottles on the floor, and then have my students do the partner drill, and they're walking around, and they got to avoid that, or else they're going to trip. And then of course you could have like a cardboard, flattened out cardboard piece, and just put that and say, you could go from one cardboard to the next. So you could do stuff like that. And the floor is lava, just like the TV show on Netflix, which is a fun show. But anyway, I digress. So you could get creative with your training and start doing that. One of the best, of course, is if you can go to like a park. It doesn't have to be a forest or a mountain or a beach or anything amazing like that. It could just be your local park. And at the local park, you may, if you're lucky, you may have like some hills, right? And incorporating that will naturally, like if you're going uphill, you're going to be slower. And the person going back upwards, that's an interesting experience. And then if you're coming down the hill, of course, you're going to be faster. And the person going backwards on that is also an interesting experience. So now that you're going to see the benefit to being uphill. So when you are on a higher plane than the opponent, you do get some advantages there, but you also have to watch out for your feet and your legs, because those can become vulnerable. So there are all kinds of things to experience there to make your skills a little bit more combat ready. Now, that sounds like a lot, and it could be. Everything that I just mentioned right now is a lot, but to me, it's still beginner, okay? And so over the years, I've been, just encouraging people to get as much experience. Like if you've never done it in the rain, or you've never done it like in a swimming pool, partner training is what I'm talking about, or even just solo training. These are things that you need to experience. Why is it important to do this kind of stuff in the rain? Well, you never know. In a self-defense situation or in a combat situation, you may be in the rain. But also, training with the weapons wet and your grip is also wet. This could simulate blood. This could simulate sweat and fear, adrenaline, sweat that is caused by that. So your hands can get slippery and stuff. So it is valuable experience. And I've said to you guys, get this kind of experience. If you've never trained on gravel, it's so important to get the experience, because experience is very strong in a real life situation. And so I've been encouraging that over the years. But then, people have always asked me about footwork, and over the years I've said on YouTube that footwork is a technique that I see people learn the traditional method of footwork, and then they literally try to apply that in their techniques. And I see them do it, and I've been there, believe me. I've been there, and then when it came to full contact sparring, it didn't come out. And that's why I didn't teach it that way. Yes, I still taught the footwork. Like this is how I learned footwork, and it's the same as everybody else, where you're putting the sticks down on the ground. But from my experience, at least for me personally, it didn't work out for me. To me, that was a great way to understand and study and expand footwork. But as far as like application, it was not there. Therefore, I didn't teach it for like combat ready. I did teach it as this is part of the traditional curriculum, but I did not teach it as far as being combat ready goes. And that is what I've been doing on YouTube. So I said, if you are interested in footwork, and I'm sure a lot of people are asking me for combat purposes, and a lot of people will not test it out in full contact just because you can't, or it's just too dangerous, or that's too much of a commitment to the art. People don't want to do that much. They want to train in it, but not to the point where you're doing like full contact training. That's a much higher level of training. So I can understand that. And in that case, but you still want it for combat application. So then it's like, okay, and that's why, that's where the dilemma comes in. And that's where I was saying the solution for me was to teach you guys and just say to you guys, hey, it's a technique. And because it's a technique, well, then that means you're going to learn one or two and just keep that and use that, one or two most. Because when it comes to full contact sparring, that's what you do with all the techniques. You could learn 100 different techniques in training for educational purposes, but then when it comes down to it, you're not going to be using all 100 because the situation doesn't require that. But also, you're probably going to go to your bread and butter, what you're comfortable with, what you're good at. And if not, you're probably just going to lose in a street situation. You're just going to get beat up or whatever, but just be unsuccessful. But you want to stick to what you're good at, and if you are able to use it, then chances are you might do pretty well. And that's just simple, like the laws of the street kind of thing. And sometimes that may not be good enough, but you're going to tend to go with what you're good at. Therefore, that's why I say that for footwork, treat it as a technique, and I still stand by that. Yeah, and I hope people don't misunderstand that as I'm going against the traditional curriculum, because I don't, and I clearly said that I teach that. To this day, I will still teach it. A student comes up to me and they ask me about footwork. I will teach it to them and I'll say, this is the traditional method, and please learn it, But I tell them, but for application purposes, that's not what we're going to do, okay? And so the next part, as far as like where we left off, is you're comfortable walking with your partner, and then I said, now try different terrain. Try going outside and working on that. Now you could do all of that solo as well. So if you've never done, like, let's say Heaven 6, and you already know Heaven 6, and you've never like ran on the street from one block to the next doing Heaven 6 full speed, then that's definitely something you want to experience, okay? That's the kind of stuff that will help you in combat. So definitely do stuff like that, okay? Or running zigzag, trying to avoid someone who might have a firearm or something like that, okay? A projectile weapon. Or someone's just trying to throw a rock at you. So you want to be able to run zigzag. Now, if you've never done that while swinging the stick, definitely experience that. But anyway, so the next part, now we're getting more technical, and this I would say is more intermediate, I guess. I don't really like to go beginner, intermediate, advanced, because then everyone wants to focus on advanced, and they kind of tend to not show the respect or put in the time that the beginner stuff requires. And without that kind of solid foundation, you could know intermediate, advanced is useless. It's like someone who just has a library of books, but they have the knowledge there at their disposal, but they cannot put it into actual usage. Therefore, you need to, like building a building, you need a solid foundation, and each floor needs to be solid to build upon. So anyway, the next part would be, now we're getting more technical, and to be technical, I like to start with the floating foot, which once again, that name comes from Sensei Rick. I've never heard it called that before, but it was definitely something that I had taught, that I had been taught, or I had seen and been taught before several occasions. Cross-training with people from different styles, Kali, Escrima, and Arnis. But yeah, and on YouTube you can see like Filipino martial arts experts doing it as well. And the way that I saw it, and the way that I learned first with the floating foot, was it was just kind of like a rhythm thing. And so as you're doing the Heaven Six or something with a partner, we just constantly have that rhythm in there where we're both doing the floating foot, where that front leg is being pulled back. And the best way, once again, for me, the interesting part is, if I cannot do it in full contact, how am I supposed to do it in the street? So people say, like, full contact, that's a sport. That is not street. Well, like I said, it is an abstract version of the street. That's the way that I see it. Because yes, it doesn't have weapons or multiple opponents or a lot of the elements, the chaotic elements that the street brings. So it is more abstract. It is more easier to work with in that sense. The level can be much, much higher in sport, because your competition can be much, much more game, much, much more seasoned and whatnot. But street, like I said, brings different elements that make it extremely tough. So they are different at the end of the day, but they also have similarities. And the similarity here is, I'm looking at the street and the sport as the same thing, but the sport, as far as physical aggression, what's coming at me, and opposing forces and all that kind of stuff, the techniques that I'll be using, all that, I'm viewing it as the same. Now you might be going, well, I eye gouge and I bite and stuff like that. Well, I don't. So for me, the techniques will be the same. But anyway, so the sports stuff is an abstract version. And once again, if I can't do it in sport, how am I supposed to pull it off in street? That, once again, that's the way that I view it. And so in sport, we're doing the floating foot aspect, and the way that relates to that would be, like I said, in Muay Thai kickboxing, you're going to be checking with your leg. So if someone tries to kick my leg, I'll be checking with that. So it's a similar movement. Same move, wrestling. When someone shoots in to try to grab my leg and take me down, the floating foot will help me get that lead leg out of there. And that can help me go into a sprawl much easier. So if you practice that, it doesn't take much, but if you practice that, going from floating foot into sprawl, then you can see that it totally meshes well together. So in the realm of full contact, the floating foot works extremely well to me. So if you're a police officer, it is very dangerous for you to get taken down by the suspects. And if that happens, you could be in big, big trouble. So to avoid that, the floating foot training can really, really help. And I would say that is almost like a start. The floating foot is a start for you before going into like a Muay Thai leg check or of a sprawl to defend against the double leg takedown. So the floating foot to me is excellent in that sense. Okay, so once you start getting the floating foot, you could now start using that to help change your stance. But also, by that point, you are working now on being bladed. So your stance, in order to do the floating foot, one leg has to be forward. So before, when I was saying just walk, it really kind of didn't matter. But now that one side, and usually for Kali, Escrima, Arnis, it is your dominant hand. That side, because that side's holding the weapon. Why? Because why is that side forward? Because that is the side that's going to be attacking and also defending. That's why if one side is attacking and one side is defending, then depending on what I want to do, if I want to defend, then the defense side would be forward. If I want to attack, then the attack side would be forward. So that would switch. But in this case, like I said, we're talking about single weapon a lot of times. And if you're lucky to have a weapon, and that side is going to be to the front because that side's going to do everything. I don't really want to use my bare hands. That's the idea there. Do you want to defend with your bare hand, or do you want to attack with your bare hand? And the answer is neither. I want to attack or defend with the weapon. And a simple case in point is a bag of ice, right? You could get a small ice pick and break that down. Or you could use your fist. And which one? And the answer is easy. You'd rather use an ice pick. You want to use the right tool, obviously. So that's the way. If you use your hand, sure, you might be able to do it. But even a tough guy can end up with a ripped, bloody knuckle. Why injure yourself? So the idea here, okay, is now that we have to favor one side. One side goes to the front. And once we start working with that, a whole new world opens up. So this is the intermediate. Welcome to intermediate, is fighting bladed. And so now we got to go into footwork. How do we move bladed? And then I went into something very specific that boxers and kickboxers may not, which is because in sport, in a sense, they are protected by the rules because you're not supposed to hit each other in the groin. But for the street, that is totally game, and that's why I made such a big deal about the rocking motion to help you circle. The circling is 100% boxing, kickboxing, MMA. They use it. And to this day, if you don't understand the basics of being able to circle to the opponent's back or circle towards their front, and if you don't do it at the right time, to this day, you could see UFC fighters, which is a very high-level athlete, you could see them getting knocked out, or you could see them getting the advantage just by utilizing that footwork, the circling footwork of going towards the back or going towards the front. And it's super simple. Anyone can really do it. Of course, you need to practice it, but it's not a difficult thing. And what makes it hard is not the technique or the strategy itself. What makes it hard is under pressure. Can you do it? The guy is trying to tear your head off, or the guy made contact on you. And a lot of people, if you're tough and someone punches you in the face, you want to give that back. And then at that point, you're completely forgetting about the circling footwork. So those are the things that make it tough. The technique, the strategy, understanding that is not tough at all. It's easy. But being able to hold your composure against someone that's coming after you or someone that's threatening your life and whatever, that is what makes it tough for street or sport. But anyway, because I never want to say, oh, this is easy, anyone can do it. When I ever say that on YouTube, I always mean the technique is easy, but I will never say that it's easy to do in a real life situation, because even just something as simple as breathing can be difficult in a real life situation. And there's many times that I've forgotten to breathe in full contact sparring, where I just held my breath. When things get intense, it naturally happens. So then you got to immediately recover from that. So that's a lesson that I, to this day, do not ever want to forget, and I constantly remind myself. And I will say to you guys as well, is that in real life, nothing's easy, okay? And if it seems easy, it's because you were lucky. It just looks easy, but it doesn't mean that it was. And so anyway, now, the one thing that I forgot to mention in the video that I made was that here, in this bladed stance, and you're trying to do the footwork here, and I showed you guys the rocking movement. So this is more like, just imagine an MMA fighter, a kickboxer, or a boxer. This is the kind of footwork that closer to what they're utilizing. Okay, but from there, when you get closer in, there is a reason why boxers, kickboxers, MMA fighters jump rope for me. And it's not just about cardio. It's also because this small jumps tie into movement, and it ties into adjusting. If you know how to do this comfortably, then you are able to maintain this bladed stance with a wide base, and you can make adjustments. Because the opponent's also coming at you, and you're moving, trying to hit them, you're going to have to make these adjustments. And if you don't know how, then the natural thing for people to do is to step. And if you step, you lose your stance. You lose the wide stance. Now you're literally going to be a step behind, and you got to recover from that, get into a fighting position, and all that. So if you're able to make these small hops, small adjustments, then it really is time efficient. And that's huge. So that comes from the jump roping, that comes from shadow boxing. You got to practice that in your footwork. And that's something that I forgot to mention in the video. And also another thing is something that I saw Mike Tyson do on YouTube video, where he's instructing a former MMA guy, was that he was doing, I don't know what to call it. I'm going to have to make up a name for it because I didn't hear them give it a name, but I call it like parallel footwork and parallel stepping. What this is you maintain the wide stance and you use one leg as a pivot and the other leg moves. And my bad. So that would be first, I have to establish that. So that is pivoting footwork. Okay, so one leg becomes the base and the other leg moves around, keeping that distance. So it's like a compass. You know, you are making, so whether if this leg is the base, then this leg is wide apart right here. It moves around like you're making a circle. Okay, so that's the pivoting footwork. So that's number one. The parallel footwork is where you're going to move them both together like this. They're both, but they maintain the distance here. They maintain this space here, and they move like that. So that is the parallel footwork. So you have to understand the pivoting footwork first, then you practice the parallel footwork. And they both go together. And that also works well with the minor hopping movements that I mentioned. So you combine all of that, that's some pretty solid footwork in my opinion, with the circling footwork that I mentioned in the video. So that's already to me a lot of technical footwork, and that's all very, very useful in full contact. Very usable, very useful in the full contact realm. So I mean, this is, to me, gold material. So I do that. And then from here on, next is we have individual techniques that come from Kali, Escrima, Arnis that you could add on. So now that you have a solid foundation of footwork by this point, the third step for me, now this is the advanced stuff. This is now where we're going back to the library, which is Kali, Escrima, Arnis, and you're taking individual techniques and now you're applying it with the foundation. So if you don't have the foundation, then this is pointless. Then this is what everybody else does. They learn the traditional stuff, but they don't have the foundation. And then I don't want to judge everybody, but I think that there's a very high percentage that once they're in a real life situation, it's going to go out the window, you know. So, but once you have the foundation that I mentioned to you guys, step 1, step 2, beginner, and then intermediate, now we can go to the advanced. And in the last video, the advanced stuff that I was mentioning was the hopping, a hop sliding footwork. This is one of the first footworks that I learned when I was training in Filipino martial arts. And the way that was taught to me was we go in at a 45-degree angle and we slide in that way, and we're going to have a bolo or a machete, and you're going to slice the guy's hamstrings, and that's it, that it's done. Now, what I was doing there on the video was I was doing that not just once, but I was doing it 1, 2, 3 maybe. I was doing it multiple times where you're going like here. So going zigzag essentially, because going diagonal, 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 diagonal. So that makes the zigzag pattern. And that's what I was doing. So that's one technique from the infinite number of Filipino martial arts footwork techniques, but that's one that I took and presented to you guys. There's others. There's plenty more others that you could incorporate, but that's a major one that I've seen a lot of Filipino martial arts people practicing and teaching and trying to use in full contact. So I wanted to bring that one into the picture and make it, hopefully the way that I taught it was easy to understand. I'm sorry about the video quality, but hopefully it's a lot simpler than some of the ones that I've seen where the teacher, to me, it was the way they were explaining was confusing. So I tried to make it as simple as possible for you guys. But yeah, you get the techniques from the traditional method, and now you apply it into what you already know, which is the beginner and intermediate stuff, and you blend it together. And that, to me, is where the advanced stuff comes out. That's the way that I'm defining it, and that's what I do personally. So that stuff is, like I said, I treat it as a technique. It doesn't come out the whole time. So like if I'm in a combat situation, I'm not going to be using the zigzag the entire situation. To me, that's like you're a robot and you're trying to force that into a chaotic real life situation. And I don't see that as very effective. Now people can argue with me and maybe they can do well, good for them. But for me, that doesn't work. For me, I need something that's a lot more natural. So what do? Think of our first 2 steps. The first step was just to be natural and just to be able to walk or just to be able to run or sprint as you're doing the techniques. So if it comes down to it, that's what's coming out. That's what I'm going to be doing. So I need that, rather than force something that was, taught to me and trying to apply it like a robot when it just doesn't feel natural, right? And then the next step is to get that and make it a little bit more technical, but it's still natural. And I've seen it used in full contact many, many times. So that's the intermediate stuff. Like I said, it's been used in full contact. There's no more proof that I need there. And then number 3, like I said, is when I get an opportunity, that's when I'll put in the technique from the traditional methods. And hopefully that'll be cause a big effect in the real life situation that I'm in. So anyway, that's pretty much it of what I want to say with the footwork stuff. Another confirmation for me is there's plenty of guys that are 100 million times better than I am at Filipino martial arts here on YouTube. What I'm interested in is watch when those guys actually spar. Okay, and I don't mean light sparring or play sparring. I mean when they're really like, it's close to 100%, okay? Or in some cases, it's 100% full force, okay? Watch those videos, because there are some. There's not a lot, but there are some. Watch their footwork, and you'll see that they are not using the traditional footwork the entire time, or it goes straight out the window. And these are guys that are way better than me. So this is why, after studying those guys, I'm like going, well, it's not just me, it's those guys too. So this is why I'm doing it this way. This is my method, where natural is the first foundation. Number 2 is what works in full contact. And number 3 is now we're getting the techniques from the traditional curriculum and putting them in there. Okay, so that's it for now. Thank you for viewing and take care, folks.